I think across the board, I mean, from years we have been seeing this that, either we are just a vote bank or, we are there for different parties or different governments to play around with, no? So whether it be announcing schemes just before the budgets or, before the elections, that they try to woo voters from a specific identity or community. We've seen this happening over the years. It doesn't matter which party or which government is in power. We have always been used like that. But I think that we have to look at, now that the budget is going to be released, we have to look at it from the lens of the most marginalized, to see that budgets is not only, it is an act, right? At the end of it, they are liable, they are accountable to the people on the ground. And to be able to cater to the people on the ground, it cannot be just by mere announcing some schemes and by merely saying that, these schemes are available and this is what we are going to give. If you look at what is the ground situation, and sometimes when we look at the amount of budgets that have been allocated, it's really fantastic if you look at it on paper. But actually, what is coming to the ground, how much of that budget is actually reaching the people on the ground? How much of that budget is actually making a difference in people's lives? Is finally the impact that we have to see. We all do project proposals, and we send out proposals, and we always have an outcome. What is the outcome? What is the output? I don't think here they're really taking that seriously to see that what is the outcome in the last 10 years. If we've looked at huge allocations made, but at the end of it, when you look at the ground, the amount that is coming, just to give you an example of what I'm saying. For example, last year, the allocation just for scheduled castes was about 1,65,493 crores, just for SCs. And for STs, it is 1,24,909 crores, but which is about 11%. It should be about 16%, but which is about 11%. Out of this, the only 3% of this total has come, actually is going for actual schemes or actually going to make an impact in the community. So it's one thing to say that, we want to have this as one of our priorities, and it's another thing to see whether this is actually being implemented on the ground. And this 3 or 4% that they're actually going to the ground is for schemes like scholarships, for example, or some schemes particularly specific to school education, for example. These are schemes that we want more money to be pumped into, so that eventually people can, get an education and go and have jobs, and we want them to at the end have an employment, etc. So I think that we have to demand, in this budget and for the next budgets to come, that apart from just giving an allocation is not enough, but to ensure that it is implemented, and it's implemented to look at the impact that in the last so many years, what has this really impacted on the ground. And I think that is something that we are all monitoring collectively to see how that is being happening on the ground. Let's look at the positive. Let's not only focus on what is the negative. The positive is that there has been an increase over the last so many years. That is not because there's so much love suddenly for Dalits and Adivasis and we want to give more budget. It's just because the total budget has increased. So when there is a total increase in budget, invariably the proportion that is allocated for SCs and STs increases. So that is a good thing. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. Definitely, they have in any of the budgets, while there was a danger of them pulling out the post-metric scholarship completely, there has been a consistent amount that is allocated for the post-metric scholarship, and that is a good thing. There is, other schemes, scholarship schemes for Adivasis as well. So that we think is a good thing, and that should continue. In fact, we are demanding for a 10,000 crore budget for just for post-metric scholarship, so that because the demand is very high and the amount that comes is very less, so we're demanding that as well. One of the trends that we're seeing, which is very worrying, is like, for example, one of the things that we all want total elimination is manual scavenging. And over the years, what we are seeing is the trend seems to be that the budget that is allocated for the rehabilitation of people engaged in manual scavenging is becoming lesser and lesser. Not just that budget, but it's also the schemes for the education. Like there was a specific scheme for the education of children of people engaged in manual scavenging. That scheme also is totally now disappeared. So this is a worrying it's a very worrying trend where we are seeing that sectors or schemes that should have had allocation, in fact should have had an increased allocation, and sectors that should have had an allocation where it is supporting and helping families come out of poverty. We're seeing they're reducing the amount and the money. And some of these schemes, the girl child, there was a scheme for girl child education that is also completely gone. So here is quite a worrying trend where we are seeing that it is being reduced. The other, so education is one thing. Health, there aren't many schemes actually. If you look at at the micro level, there aren't many schemes in health specific for SC and ST. So there also we are saying that you have to have more schemes for SC, ST. So there also we see a lot of cuts. So whichever, whether it's health, whether it's health sector, education sector, these are sectors that are so important for the well-being, for for people to get out of poverty. These sectors and schemes, we can see that there is either a reduction in budget, or the schemes have been totally removed, or the schemes do not exist anymore. Having said that, what we also would expect, I think, that we want this trend to change from just survival. And that is very important, that we don't want schemes that are just for survival, that we just finish school and everybody's happy, oh, they have finished school. We want schemes and programs to support in how we can develop that person, and that person from so which means that not just school, but we want more money in the higher education, higher institutions, if they want to go to IIMs, IITs, if they want to go abroad, there is a scheme that is specific for going abroad, but that scheme is very less amount, very few students can avail of it. So this is where we're saying that we want that trend to be that in these sectors where, like for example, in the science field, there is no programs or schemes to encourage students to take that field. So somewhere there we feel that there should be more more programs and schemes for asset building, for ensuring, for the development part of the families and for the community. Our recommendation is definitely the sectors of health, education, agriculture. We are mostly in the laborer side, so if it affects the agriculture, it affects us. But at the end, like for example, if there's a disaster, we all know that only the person who owns that land will get the amount, but the person who loses his livelihood does not get any kind of compensation. So I think there we would like that that land is given a priority, that there are schemes that are able to ensure that people are able to buy land, or there's a scheme. I know some states have that, but at the national level, we would demand that. We want that ministries ensure that post-metric scholarship, hostels for post-metric skill development should continue with a higher allocation, so at least 10,000 crores for post-metric scholarship. Apart from that, national overseas scholarship is something that we think this is a must. We cannot forego any of that. A total of the 50% of the budget for Dalit women's schemes. So if we look at the atrocities, there's a rise in atrocities over the last so many years. And the atrocities are rising and the crimes against women are rising. So about 5,000 to 7,000 crimes are just against women. But there are no safe houses. There are no legal provisions specific for Dalit women. So I think it's important that we have at least 50% of the budget, total budget, which I mean total budget of SCP-TSP, to be allocated for schemes specifically for Dalit women. We would really think that in the next 5 years, we want to eliminate manual scavenging completely. So, there, for the rehabilitation of women and men engaged in manual scavenging, we want that money is put there and is allocated so that we can totally eliminate, the manual scavenging completely. We are talking all over the world globally about climate crisis and the loss and damage budget and loss and damage funds that have been that have been approved. So within country, we're looking at a national climate budget with earmarking specifically for adaptation and mitigation, uh, and specifically from the lens of the marginalized. I think this is important because in the next decade, climate crisis is going to just gain so much momentum, and the impact of that will mostly be felt by people on the ground. So we're hoping that there is more budget allocated and the programs are implemented. Finally, a long-standing demand of the community has been that we have to legislate the scheduled caste subplan and tribal subplan, or the allocation for the welfare of SCs, which it is called now. That there are legislations in 4 or 5 states in the country, and we would request, I mean, we would demand that there's a national legislation that also comes so that there can be a much more stronger accountability systems in place to implement the budgets that are allocated for Dalits and Adivasis. In Andhra, Telangana, Karnataka, Uttarakhand, and quite recently in Rajasthan, these are the 5 states that there is a legislation specifically for the scheduled caste subplan and tribal subplan, which is the old name I'm still using because many of these legislations are with that old name. And the legislation gives provisions as to how it should be utilized. What are the ways that it can be effectively implemented. And because it is a legislation, there is a much greater accountability system where the government have to follow certain, as of now at the national level, it's only a guideline, it's only a policy. So this has been a demand for a very long time, that we have to legislate this policy and make it a legislation, make it a law at the national level, so that we are able to give it a little bit more teeth and give it a little bit more, strengthen this argument that, we need a legislation to implement it effectively. Because now, even if you want to ask for any kind of accountability, they're like, okay, it's only a policy, it's not mandatory. I mean, we don't have to abide by it because it is not a law as yet, right? So we want that to be legislated so that we can hold them accountable for the amount of money that has been diverted, the amount of money that goes unspent, the amount of money. Recently in Delhi, for example, we were talking to some people to implement the schemes for at the Delhi level. You don't have to show this, but I'm just giving an example as to that. They said that for the last 2 years, the money from the center has not been transferred to the states. So when there's a legislation, they can hold them and say that, this money has not been transferred. Why for 2 years? And because that money has not been transferred, they're not able to implement any of these schemes. So we have like hundreds of people filling forms for these schemes that they will never get because there is no budget. So the government will simply say that we have not received budget from the government. So some of these things will be very well, detailed out in the in this particular legislation and the rules that will come out once it's enacted. And that is something that we have been asking for the last 10, 15 years. And hopefully, if that happens, then that is a, a very bold step in ensuring effective implementation of the budgets allocated for Dalits and Adivasis.